It was a common Sunday in the Torres family home. At the garden table, colorful juices, Fina's necks, loud laughs. Alvaro, the patriarch, wore linen shorts and an open dress shirt at the waist. Seemed relaxed, but his gaze always passed over those he considered inferior. Next to him, Claudia arranged a dish, while Isabella, the 12-year-old daughter, was playing alone with a portable chessboard. On the other side of the yard, almost invisible, Marlene discreetly washed the dishes that remained from lunch. The sun was beating down hard in her already calloused hands. They scrubbed the dishes carefully. It had been this way for years. Came in through the door. Service came out in silence. Knew more about that family's life than many relatives did, but no one knew almost anything about her. "Oh, Marlene," Alvaro shouted, with a mocking tone of laughter. "Come here for a minute." She quickly dried her hands on the apron and approached with her body slightly leaning towards front, always respectful. "Of course, sir. ISA wants to play a game of chess. But no one here knows how to move the pieces," he said, laughing. "Do you want to show us that you're good at strategy?" Claudia gave a little smile. Isabella looked at her father, suspicious of the intention. "But I never." Marlene hesitated. "It's going to be fun," interrupted Claudia with false lightness. "Just a little joke." Marlene looked at the board. For the attentive eyes of all and for the couple's daughter, it was clear that it was not a polite invitation. It was a test. A joke. Another one of those moments when the maid served now not with her hands, but with dignity. She could refuse. But something inside her, perhaps the memory of a very ancient time, made her say, "I could try, yes." Sat in the chair, in front of Isabella. The pieces were messy. Marlene calmly organized everything. White pieces on one side, blacks on the other. Chose to play with the white pieces. Would start the room. Remained silent. Claudia assured Alvaro's laughter. Crossed her arms waiting for the embarrassing scene to happen. But at the first movement that Marlene did, everyone's breath seemed to freeze. Bishop shoves Ankita, a rare opening move. Elegant, studied. Alvaro frowned. Isabella looked at the move and then at the woman's face, which until then was just the cleaning woman. Claudia adjusted in her chair, not knowing what to say, and Marlene just took a deep breath, like someone returning to a view over the garden. It was dense. It seemed that, suddenly, the sound of the birds and even the wind had ceased just to observe that board. Alvaro scratched his chin. Intrigued, he looked at Claudia as if seeking confirmation that it was really happening. Happening. She played that on purpose. He murmured, but more to himself than to anyone. Isabella hesitated, but continued the match, moved a pawn nervously. She was used to winning even more when the opponents played to please. But Marlene did not move the pieces hesitantly. Each move came with time, with calculation, with memory. "You play well," said Isabella, looking into her eyes. "My grandfather taught me," Marlene replied, in a calm voice. Alvaro smiled at the corner of his mouth, trying to ease what already seemed a slight embarrassment. "What a coincidence. Our housekeeper's grandfather was a chess player. It can only be a joke." Marlene lowered her eyes, but didn't let herself be shaken. Kept playing and, in less than 5 minutes, broke the girl's defense with a perfect fork knight, taking the rook and king in check. "Check," she said. Without raising her voice, Claudia was now frowning. "You were trying to keep your pose." But the discomfort was evident. No one expected that, and much less knew how to react. "Did you really learn to play?" asked Isabella, now more curious than frustrated. "I learned when I was little. My grandfather worked as a watchman at a club. He took old books in the trash and taught me at home. I used to play with him on nights when there was no light." That phrase felt like a silent rock. In the center of the table, there was no more room for the joke. What started as a rich person's game was now turning into a lesson. Alvaro cleared his throat. "Well, I think that's enough for a match, right?" But Isabella didn't want to stop. "Dad, wait. She's winning, and I want to learn." Claudia tried to change the subject, to divert the conversation, but the atmosphere was different. For the first time in a long time, someone, that comfortable circle, had attracted attention not out of necessity, but because of the ability. Marlene smiled slightly, not out of vanity, but why she might be rediscovering a piece of herself. There, the board was more than a game. It was a memory of who she used to be and of who, maybe it could still be. At that moment, the rich girl looked at the maid with respect. And the father, with restlessness and for the first time. It wasn't Marlene who felt like she was in checkmate clean in 11 moves. No one laughed, no one applauded. The silence was no longer one of mockery. It was of astonishment. Isabella was enchanted. Claudia disguised her embarrassment. Alvaro feigned normality, but her clenched jaw revealed the discomfort. Marlene just thanked and stood up, ready to return to the dishes. But before he could leave, Isabella assured, by the arm, wait. Can you teach me? The question was sincere, without arrogance, without the intention of seeming charity. Just a girl recognizing someone who knew more than she did. Marlene smiled, of course. If your mother lets you. Claudia forced a smile and felt her. Yes, of course. Then calmly. Alvaro remained silent, staring intently at Marlene. Something about that woman now bothered him, as if she had crossed an invisible line that separated those who serve from those who shine. Later, in the service area, Marlene was washing her hands looking at the floor. Her heart hit harder than usual. That game stirred ancient things. Memories, wounds that never closed. On that same day, while organizing Isabella's clothes, the girl entered the room with a book in her hands. This one is for chess. It was on my father's shelf, but he never read. It's yours now. Marlene picked up the book as if holding a relic. Thank you very much, Isa. You can't imagine what this means to me. You used to play with your grandfather. She felt her sitting on the edge of the bed carefully. My grandfather was named Johnny. He was a night watchman at a club. When the shift ended, he brought books that the members threw away. She said that the knowledge that nobody wanted still valued a lot. He taught you everything. Everything and more. Taught me to think. Said that chess is like life. You need a plan. To predict, but also to accept when the opponent's move is strong. Isabella, did she hear like someone learning a rare truth? For the first time, someone in that room was teaching something without giving orders. In the living room, Claudia was talking to Alvaro. I think Marlene really has talent, and Isabella likes it. I don't see a problem, do you? Of course he sees, he cut. Do you know what happens when people like that start to stand out? They think they can do anything. Claudia hesitated. Or maybe it's us who think they can't do anything. Alvaro answered. No. But inside it, a silent war was starting. What he thought he could control was no longer in his hands, and Marlene. Without knowing, she had made the first move of the match, more important in the Torres house. Isabella was now eagerly waiting for Marlene's arrival. With the book in hand and the board set up, the girl sat on the couch as if waiting for a special visit. Not an employee. And when Marlene entered through the back door, was received with a sincere smile. Shall we play just one game? Before lunch. Marlene hesitated, torn between duty and joy. But the girl's gaze left no room for denial. So they played, talked. They laughed, and there, in that silence, in between moves something beautiful. It blossomed, but not everyone saw it with good eyes. Alvaro watched from afar, always silent, but his gestures revealed his growing dissatisfaction. The glasses left purposefully in the living room. The harsh orders disguised as corrections. The crossed gaze. When she passed by Marlene in the hallway, Claudia noticed. What exactly bothers you? She is overstepping her bounds. Now, she sits on the living room sofa as if she were part of the family. Maybe she is just being seen for the first time. And do you think that's good? Claudia took a deep breath, knew that arguing with Alvaro when he felt threatened was useless. But the tension grew. On a Saturday morning, Marlene arrived with an old book in her hands. It belonged to her grandfather. Torn cover, marked pages he brought to show Isabella how he learned classic moves. This was the first one I read alone. I was 10 years old, reading secretly by candlelight. Isabella carefully picked up the book, like someone touching something sacred. You were very intelligent. Why didn't you become a player? Marlene smiled sadly. Life doesn't always allow. My grandfather died young. My mother got sick. I needed to work. But I liked to dream. Played alone. Used to set up imaginary tournaments. The girl stayed silent for a few seconds. Can you still? It's never too late to dream. At the door, Alvaro heard everything. The words of the daughter struck like hammer blows on his pride. It wasn't just an employee playing with the child. It was the child learning to admire someone outside of her world. That night, Alvaro called Claudia for a private conversation. I think it's time to let go of Marlene. Are you serious? I no longer feel comfortable. She's taking up too much space, Isa. She becomes attached easily, and soon she'll want Marlene to go to school with her. For graduation, for our life. And maybe that's what Isa needs the most. Someone to inspire her, not with lessons taken from the kitchen. The silence that followed was heavy. But at that moment, Claudia saw something she had never seen so clearly. Alvaro was afraid of Marlene. He was afraid of losing control over Marlene. Arrived at the Torres house. As usual, he wore his faded blue shirt, the clean apron and hair tied in a low bun. She was carrying a jar of homemade cookies for Isabella. But something in the air felt different. Claudia was in the room, staring blankly out the window when Marlene entered. She turned with a forced smile. Good morning, Mrs. Claudia. Good morning, Marlene. Can we talk for a moment? Marlene felt the cold in her stomach. Did she know that tone? Was the same as what preceded the dismissal. The end. The silence without explanations. But she nodded with her head and followed her employer to the dining room. Marlene, I want you to know that you have done a great job. Isabella adores you, and I also admire your care for her very much. But Alvaro, she hesitated. Marlene completed. Calmly, Mr. Alvaro, do you think I'm crossing my limits? Isn't it? Claudia was surprised by the clarity of the answer. He thinks that the relationship between you and Isa can confuse things, that it might be better to take a break. Marlene took a deep breath, didn't cry, didn't complain, just lowered her eyes and said, I understand, I didn't want it to be like this. Claudia insisted. For real, Marlene took the small jar with cookies and placed it on the table. Give it to her, please. Says it was a pleasure to play with her and that I learn a lot too. Claudia tried to answer, but the words didn't come out. Marlene went to the service room, took her worn bag, and left through the back door. Like she entered every day for the last 4 years. Only this time he left with his head held high. Hours later, when Isabella returned from school and didn't find, Marlene rushed to her mother, anxious. Where's she? Claudia tried to explain gently, but the girl understood and for the first time broke down in tears. She was not just the cleaning lady. She was my friend in the... That night, Isabella took the chessboard and placed it in the living room. Sat alone. Played against herself. The same movements that Marlene taught her. Knight in Fianchetto, bishop in the center, protected queen. Alvaro passed through the room. Saw her daughter there, focused. Something inside him weighed, but too proud. Continued in silence. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Marlene sat on the porch of the small boarding house where she lived, picked up her old chess book, opened to the, laughed at the marked page, and started to set up a new game. But this time it would be different. She was not going to wait for someone to take their turn anymore. Now, it was her, 2 whole weeks since Marlene last stepped into the Torres house. The silence of that farewell still echoed in his mind, but not as pain, it was impulse. Something had been awakened. Something ancient, but never defeated. On a Saturday morning, sitting on the park bench, with the chess book on her lap, Marlene watched 2 gentlemen playing. They laughed, provoked each other, made mistakes. One of them, wearing a beret, noticed her attentive gaze. Do you like chess, Mom? She smiled. I play a little. Want to try? Marlene hesitated, but he sat down within minutes. The two men were silent, watching the mastery with which she handled the pieces. When you easily won the match. One of them said, should you participate in the club tournaments? Right on Wednesdays. Shows up there. She thanked but did not respond. That night, she thought a lot. Remembered his grandfather's games, the candlelight, the nights dreaming of the championships, and decided. The following week, showed up at the club. It was a simple space, with wooden tables, manual clocks, smell of old coffee. But for her, it felt like a temple. Played, won, and came back the following week and won again. One of the attendees approached. Curious, do you play a lot? Have you ever thought about signing up? In municipal circuit, they are opening spots for amateurs with technical ratings. Marlene smiled. I never thought of that, but maybe it's time. With the help of the club players, Marlene was registered in the league, borrowed a digital watch, simple competition shirt, and on a Saturday morning, went into an auditorium full of boards and opponents, sat down, took a deep breath, looked around, and she knew that was her place. Meanwhile, at the Torres house, Isabella did not forget, kept the board ready, played alone, but always spoke of Marlene. She said that it is not enough to protect the king. We have to know when to sacrifice the rook to save the game. Claudia, touched by the longing for her daughter, decided to seek news. Called Marlene's former colleague. She obtained the name of the club and discovered that Marlene was now a candidate for the state championship. In the same week, a local article circulated. Former domestic worker surprises in chess and advances towards the state title. Alvaro saw the headline on his phone. Her face hardened. It wasn't just Marlene winning the game. She was the one winning the narrative. Space voice. And for the first time, she felt the discomfort of students. Veterans and curious onlookers gathered to watch the state championship final. The amateur chess club was an unusual scene for the audience. Among the well-dressed competitors and technicians, there she was, Marlene, with her simple blouse and hair tied up, sitting with a firm posture and calm eyes on the audience. Discreetly, Claudia and Isabella sat in the last rows. The girl was trembling with emotion. Mom, she made it this far. Claudia squeezed her hand and arrived with dignity. No one could take that away from her. On the other side of the hall, Alvaro, he was standing, leaning against the column, arms crossed, didn't warn that she would come, but she brought pride as armor deep down. He wanted to see with his own eyes if it was real, if the woman he had dismissed for excess. The brightness truly deserved the stage it now occupied. Marlene's opponent was young, technical, confident, but in the first 15 minutes of the game, she led the match with mastery. His hands came over the board, as if they were reading a silent score. The moves were clean, elegant, unlikely. And then the final move. Tower in line, knight blockade, checkmate, inevitable silence. Later, timid applause turned into a round of applause. The referee stood up, lifted Marlene's arm, and declared, "State champion." Isabella cried with joy. Claudia applauded with teary eyes. And Alvaro didn't know how to feel afterwards. Event outside. Marlene, left alone, carried the small trophy in her hands with humility, was walking towards the bus stop when she heard a voice, Marlene. She turned around. Alvaro, congratulations. You played very well. She felt it. Thank you. I wanted to apologize for what happened. For what I made you feel. She took a deep breath, not like water, but with the firmness of someone who learned to respect themselves. No. Do you need to apologize for me? But maybe for your own sake, he didn't respond. That's how life is. One day you will command the board. In the other, he realizes he never understood the game for real. She turned her back and left with the trophy in hand and the world ahead. Today, Marlene is recognized as one of the revelations of national chess. Teaches children in communities. participates in championships, and inspires other women not to give up on their own minds. Story. Isabella keeps playing, and every time she moves the first piece, remembers the woman who taught him that not everyone who starts from the bottom ends up losing. And in the memory of those who watched that game, the most valuable lesson was recorded. Touched humility. And if you also believe that talent has no uniform and that respect is the greatest victory, comments. Here the world needs more Marlenes. Says, where are you watching this story from? Let's show how far the voice of overcoming can go. And she doesn't forget to subscribe to the channel, because here in the mystery, the millionaires, we don't only show wealth. Reveals cases where true greatness lies in the heart. Until the next story,